Namaste. Did you know that cars are designed to kill you? 150,000 people die every year in India from car accidents. That's 400 people per day. Okay? That's more than the coronavirus count. When they're showing the statistics like it is a cricket score about the corona deaths, then they should show these other statistics along with. If they really wanted to stop human deaths, then they should ban cars first. I'll tell you why. First of all, the seat belts issue. The seat belt is something that is an individual's choice. It is not the authorities' right to enforce seat belts upon people, especially when cars are driven at less than 100 kilometers per hour. At low speeds, a seat belt is unnecessary. And the second thing is that the seat belt actually and high-speed car accidents breaks your bones, breaks your rib cage, because it's across your body, and the impact of a sudden halt breaks rib cages of many people. So many people have died because of the seat belts and not because of not wearing a seat belt. Moreover, the seat belts, if they really wanted to design seat belts that would protect people, it should be like a harness that pilots wear. So it's a 3-point harness that keeps both shoulders glued to the seat, and it goes across the waist as well. But that is not the design of these seat belts. It's just these very flimsy strips that supposedly go in the name of seat belts. Then let me talk about headrests. So primarily they install the headrest, again not for really protecting you from that whiplash that supposedly injures the neck, but also to separate people. They don't want people talking in the cars and becoming bonding. They don't want that. So the seat belt actually protects, covers the driver's head. So really the backseat passenger really cannot, all it sees is the seat and the headrest, and really cannot communicate with the driver properly. The other thing about these headrests is if you look at a seat, it already looks like a robot. So the seat is the body and the headrest is like the head. And usually there's a hole in the headrest. Okay, so that looks like the robotic eyes. So subconsciously, and you're taking in all this information. You do not need to know about it. So basically you're sitting on the robot's lap and driving the car. So basically the robot is doing the driving. So this is how they progressively manipulate human subconscious to further their agenda. Then there's the windshield. If you look at the cars designed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the windshield used to be almost vertical. There is no need for this windshield to be tilted at such a high degree. and it's probably tilted at 33 degrees, which is, if you subtract 33 from 100, 33.33 from 100, then you get 66.66. So 66 degrees. I mean, the number 33 is very important for this Freemasonry, the Freemasonic society that believe in this sort of occult numerology. So what happens with this windshield at a 33-degree angle coming at you in the name of aerodynamics is that in case of a crash, the person who's not wearing a seat belt is thrown at the windshield, and the chances of him getting out of the car through the windshield are very less. Whereas when the windshield was straight, a person would just fly through the car and break the windshield and get out of the car, and the chances of maybe surviving were higher than hitting somebody's head and breaking his skull at a windshield that is tilted at a 33-degree angle. So all this in the name of aerodynamics. What are they talking about aerodynamics? We should be able to drive cars at 300 kilometers an hour, 400 kilometers an hour. Then you're talking aerodynamics. A car that is going at 120 kilometers max because of speed limits doesn't need aerodynamics. This is again this scientific mumbo jumbo to sell you junk. Do you know how the term car came about? So what happened was, before cars there were horse carriages. So the carriages driven by horses, that's what a group of people used to take to commute. Now, when the horse was removed, because this was called a horseless carriage, when the car engine came about, that was called a horseless carriage. And so people were like, wow, horseless, so I am going to be able to drive this carriage, and the feeling of autonomy, because they thought you don't have to take care of a horse like that. So that's where the horse disappeared, and so from horseless carriage it became just a carriage, and from carriage it became car, shortened. So when you're driving a car, you're basically driving a carriage which doesn't have a horse. Then the steering, okay, cars haven't evolved. Like if you look at the initial cars, they used to have like tiller steerings. Tiller steering means there was just a rod. If you turn it left, the car used to go left, and if you turn it right, the car used to turn right. And after the tiller steering came this round wheel, which over 100 years they haven't been able to change the design. And just think about it, when it's a round wheel, you are just going left or right, you're not going up or down. And so when you're turning this steering, it's not like the car is turning, what they call in tilt, in terms of pilot's terminology, it's called tilt and yaw. So you are neither tilting the car nor yawing the car. You're just going left or right. So ideally, the first steering wheel that used to come with the cars, which is the tiller steering. So if you go left, you turn the rod left, and if you go right, you turn the rod right. That's all. That's all the movement that there is in a car. But to get you addicted to feel like you're driving some sort of aeroplane or ship, they put this round steering in place. And ever since, they didn't upgrade it to either a joystick or some other form of steering, because of these. Again, it's commerce and agendas. Then let's talk about small cars. So if you're in a small car, you are more compact. Like the Italians came out, there was this Fiat, and then Volkswagen came out with the Volkswagen Mini. This was in the 60s, 50s and 60s. Right after World War II, there was this period of freedom where real designers could actually design cars without the corporate hierarchy breathing down their necks. So they came up with this small car concept where you suppose a family of 4 or 5 and you can comfortably squeeze in, and then there is this sense of bonding again that comes with small cars. And then if you look at those cars in the past, they didn't have this whole steering column separating the driver and the passenger at the front. And so this whole experience of driving, why do we like it? Because it gives a sense of sharing and going somewhere with friends and family to have an adventure. So they took away the joy when they started building bigger and bigger cars with these separating the gear shift, whatever they call it. They put the gear down in play purposely to separate you from families. Then there's the thing about tire pressure. So this is the main point that I'm driving at. So tire pressure doesn't need to be more than 5 or 10 psi. Okay? But they're letting you drive at to 20, 30, 21 psi, 31, 30, 40, 50 psi. So what happens is basically it's like you're riding on a ball. And that's why at high tire pressures, even the smallest bump or smallest problem on the road, it really jerks you about. You feel the bounce because you're basically sitting on bouncing balls in the name of tires. So you feel every small bump, every small jerk that is induced because of these high pressures, which would be better if it was just like 5 psi or something like that, or 10 psi at the max. I mean, if you look at the cycle tires, or if you look at the old horse carriage wheels, they just used to have a rubber. Okay, you inflate it a little bit, but the rubber, I mean, their whole, again, the agenda is to make you feel the bumps as much as you can, because then you will ask for roads all the time. So instead of solving the problem in the first place, you are expanding the problem. So what happens? You want a road that is very smooth, absolutely without even a minor aberration, without any flaws, which is not possible because there is wear and tear in nature, and that needs constant repair for these roads. And the other thing about these roads, it's bitumen, tar. So these fossil fuel roads again create what do you call it? They are not good for the environment. And one is that they melt whenever the sun is at 35 degrees or 40 degrees. Whenever it's hot outside, they melt. And it's very difficult for animals who cannot wear shoes to walk on these roads. Then it also produces smoke. When this bitumen heats up, it produces smoke. And this is also adding to the pollution of the air. And so this has become like a vicious circle, because you think you want a smooth drive, and instead of fixing the suspension, in fact, in France, they came up with a car in the 70s, 60s and 70s that was called the Citroën DS. So Citroën DS21. And this car had hydraulic suspension. So people who have driven that car say that they feel like they're going on a flying carpet. It was so smooth, the drive. But then, again, because of the agendas, then they never let this technology develop or get to other vehicles. So it basically, this Citroën DS21 DS models just stayed in Europe and France mainly. It was so good, the car actually, it saved the then French President de Gaulle from an assassination attempt, because even if all the tires are blown, the car can run on 3 wheels. So that balance was so perfect that with one tire completely gone, it could balance on three wheels. So again, this technology wasn't developed because they don't want the suspension. They want you in discomfort, so that you keep asking for more and more of these roads that takes this modern decay everywhere and intrudes into jungles. I mean, how many of these roads cut through wildlife sanctuaries, and the animals have a big problem crossing the roads because of the cars. So at every point, the agenda is not to help you, but to harm you and to give you as much discomfort, physically and mentally. So we're going to then the speed as well. The early electric cars, you might not know this, but electric cars came out in the 1900s, 1910, and around 1918 to 1925 were their heydays, at their peak, and these electric cars could had a top speed of about 40 kilometers an hour, 45, but it doesn't matter, because the main purpose of a vehicle, and especially cars, you are rarely using a car to go long distances, except once in a blue moon. So most of the time you're driving your car inside the city. So now these electric cars were perfect, and then they went at a low speed, and they used the tiller steering, and there was was silent, it was non-polluting, and they used to use these car batteries back then to drive these cars. But then they didn't want electric cars to become the norm, because that didn't suit their agenda. So they promoted gasoline cars, and now we see it. These fossil fuel cars are destroying our environment wherever they go. And also look at the design. They're ugly, If you look at cars from 50s and 60s, 70s, They were beautiful. Unfortunately, in India, we had like three models: the Ambassador, the Fiat, and the Jeep, because of economic blockades. But in Europe and the United States, they really enjoyed their cars back then. And my friends still talk about the joy they had driving cars in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is simply not the case nowadays. The other thing also, horsepower. Again, it's not equal to like one horsepower is not equal to one horse. Okay. So this is another, again, they do this false mathematical calculation, and then with this scientific mumbo jumbo, they try to explain, and with the propaganda, they have tried to fix this idea that 1 horsepower is equal to 1 horse, because 500 horsepower then would be like 500 horses, and 500 horses can pull maybe 20 trucks at one time. The power of 500 horses is immense, whereas a 500 horsepower car or truck can hardly pull another truck, especially up an incline. If it's going up a hill, there is no way that they can pull one truck, let alone 2 or 3 trucks. So 1 horsepower is not equivalent to 1 horse. So it's more like 10 horsepower would be equal to 1 horse, or maybe 100 horsepower is equal to 1 horse's power. Especially back in the past, because the horses were huge and powerful when there were plenty of horses. So that's another misdirection and propaganda, use of propaganda. Then why did they leave out convertibles? Convertibles are, when you can remove the hood of the car and drive and get the air in your face, and it's so much more spacious. But convertibles somehow remain only for the rich and for those who had this kind of special taste for convertibles. So that was not really promoted as a mass car, again, because they don't want you to enjoy your drive. They just want you to be in as much discomfort as possible and just get from home to work, to the shops and back home. That's all they want you to do with the cars. Then, of course, there's the thing about fossil fuels. Again, now they're developing electric cars because they don't want you to go to certain places. These automated cars run by AI, what they will do if the authority says, okay, you cannot go to this zone, or you cannot leave the city, then there is no way you can leave the city because the car is not going to go. So that's why they're promoting electric vehicles, not because they have a concern for the environment or for Mother Earth. They are developing electric cars, and that's why they haven't released it en masse, because they haven't developed the AI technology to totally control you. And the other thing is speed, right? So let's say you are like a rebel or something, and maybe you're not in good terms with the authorities, whatever the reason they don't like you, they can simply cause a car crash and kill you, because they have the AI can take over your car at any moment, because it's all connected with 5G and Wi-Fi technology. So that's also part of the agenda. I mean, you're losing control, okay? They will leave you with no control over your own mobility. You cannot go wherever you want to go. They will dictate that. And so that's the only reason that they're so-called promoting electric cars, because they want AI to control you. And one last point is that with these fossil fuel cars, it's like the mosquitoes and insects increase. And from my own research, I found out, like, let's say a village where they used to do farming and all, and before the cars, there were no cars coming up, a village on the mountain. So the only approach was like you had to walk or use a donkey or a horse to get to that village. So these villages, before when the situation that when there were no roads to these villages, the farming was green, and the villagers told me that they had no problem with insects and mosquitoes. The moment these roads came and the cars came, and along with that the smoke from the fossil fuels, they started to see an increase in insects and flies and mosquitoes and all of that, and pestilence basically upon their crops as well, and all the problems related to it once the roads and the cars came. So one of the very top reasons for this global destruction of our planet, of Earth, of the climate, is cars and roads and fossil fuels. And their agenda again is to enslave you with these devices and make you more and more of an automaton, because they're programming your subconscious. So do give it a thought, do contemplate about these things, and do what you can in your capacity to try to make people aware about this very primary issue of cars. I wish you a very wonderful day. Thank you.